I'm Dr. Dhanashri Pawar. I'm a medical doctor and founder director of Vikram Center for Autism. And here joining me are my wonderful families, my lovely mindful guides from all over the world, with my team members, my occupational therapist, Dr. Sushant, and my psychologist, Ms. Nehal. Good evening to all of you here, and thank you so much for joining in this insightful webinar on autism and RDI. Okay, so this is me, this is my family, and as most of you know, my background, and I've done my MBBS from KEM Hospital, Mumbai. Right after my graduation, I did my post-graduation in community health, and I joined government. I had been working as a medical officer for almost 10 years. And in that journey, I got my son, my angel, the elder one, and but at 2 years of age, he got diagnosed with autism, and that's how I entered this area of autism, understanding autism from the core, trying various interventions, making a lot of mistakes, making some new learnings, gaining so much insight about it. And as I went deeper and deeper, and things started helping my child, I developed this passion for this field and desire to help as many families. So that's the reason when Divyam was born in 2016, and from there on, we have been really grateful to God that we have been of some help to many families all around the world, and we continue to do so. So that's about me. If we look at autism from a very traditional mindset of what we know from the last 50 years, okay, we have been looking at autism from a very symptomatic perspective. What we commonly see is these all problems. The child has repetitive behaviors, there is a learning disorder or learning issues in school, not paying attention, hyperactive, okay, not able to take their own decision, requires continuous prompts and directions, okay, not able to communicate, interact with others. So these are one very universal, like commonest of symptoms that we see, and that's what we always hear, that this is autism. But now, after a lot of research, the latest research tells us what is the main problem, okay. So now we have started looking at autism from a core deficit perspective. So, like, the behaviors and all these symptoms have been the tip of the iceberg. But what lies inside that iceberg inside, which we cannot see, are all these core deficits of autism, which is the problems in the higher executive functioning skills, or the problems with the brain, right? So autism is not a behavioral disorder, rather it is a neurological condition. But it is neither a disease. So there is no question of curing it, because it's not a disease, it's a condition, it's a different processing system, right? So specifically, it's a slow information processing system in the brain. Okay, what happens basically to understand the effects of this slow brain or slow processing system? We need to understand how a typical brain functions. Okay, so if you look at this picture here, you will see how it is highly integrated. The wiring is so complex. These are the connections between the centers, right? And these connections are not only highly integrated, like highly communicating with each other, but rather they are very flexible too. They can change tracks, right? And because of this highly integrated brain, we have a very fast information processing system in a typical brain. And what is happening is it is happening all unconsciously. We don't need to take efforts to process information. Continuously, our brain is able to process multiple information, filter it, process it, and take adequate decision, show appropriate behaviors, do appropriate actions, or even have thoughts and ideas, right? So this is the function, and this we are able to do because we have a very good, highly integrated system. And because of that, we are very, very good in all these areas. We don't have challenges in the typical brain. When it is functioning at its optimum level, we have good communication, we are able to interact with others, we are able to learn new things, we are able to adapt to changes, right? And we are able to independently think and solve problems. And all of these areas are so important if we want to have success in the real world. Because in every field, whether it's a job or it's a business or it's a, anything that you're doing, okay, to have a good quality of life, we require all these skills, isn't it? To communicate, to be able to think independently, to learn continuously, update our knowledge, plan, analyze, and be adaptable. We have to work now in global teams, right? So we have to really adapt ourselves to different time zones, different culture, different languages that other team members use, and be flexible enough. But what happens in autism? When we look at autism, neural integration is not so strong, which means there is underconnectivity and rigid network, means they're not flexible. This creates a very different kind of information processing system, and the information that is processed is very slow and sequential. It doesn't happen simultaneously. So it's very similar to a mobile where you're kind of opening a lot of apps and it gets hung, right? The phone, it's not working. So the same way, when we give a lot of information to the brain goes into an overload, and it's a complete chaos, which we see in the form of symptoms in the child. So all these issues that we see in the under the umbrella of autism, which we talked about earlier, are actually because of underconnectivity and rigid network. And these issues, if ignored, most important cause of having a low quality of life in the adulthood, because they're not able to communicate and they're not able to adapt in new situations, not able to understand perspectives. So it causes a great deal of problem with being independent. And this is what the latest research says, that even after years of intensive therapies, adults are suffering from these problems. So, how do we intervene? One thing that we know is that we have to do something about this neural integration, because that's the ultimate treatment, isn't it? We have to increase the processing of the brain. We have to do something for the neural connections that we are able to build it again. Right? Now, a good news about this is that it is not present at birth. The neural integration at birth, we do not have such good neural integration at work. It only builds later in early childhood through so many joint play experiences with parents, with caregivers, doing tasks, having conversation, playing games. All of these early childhood experiences that we have with children are actually very powerful if you come to think about it. I mean, we never thought about this, that it can have such an effect on the brain. And it causes our neural connections to become so strong and flexible that that's the reason of having a very good information processing system. Right? But in autism, what is happening is there are some pre-born vulnerabilities, neurological issues, because of which the kids are not able to take part in these joint play experiences, which builds neural connection, which is so important for mental self and neural growth. So now we have a very clear picture in front of us, that because this back and forth is not happening, the connections are not getting strong, the neural integration is not happening, there is rigid network, and that superficially we see in the form of all the symptoms. And these symptoms are very unique to each child depending on how the brain is affected. And definitely because of these behaviors and issues, there are problems in all these major areas that we looked at, right? So now we know that autism is not a behavior disorder, it's rather a relationship disorder. Because when you do back and forth interactions, what you're actually doing is you're establishing a relationship. That's why it's called a relationship disorder.